What happens when royalty meets reality television and the crown collides with comedy? In just 37 seconds, a single comment would ignite the most explosive exit in late-night history. The studio lights blazed hot that evening as Greg Gutfeld settled into his chair, ready for another night of sharp wit and unfiltered conversation. His guest was unexpected, controversial, and guaranteed to make headlines. Prince Harry had agreed to appear on the show, a decision that would prove to be a catastrophic miscalculation. From the moment Harry walked onto the set, something felt off. The audience applauded politely, but there was tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. Greg stood to shake his hand, flashing that trademark grin that had made him a household name. "Welcome to the show, Your Highness," Greg said, gesturing to the guest chair. "Or should I just call you Harry? I never know the protocol with these things." Harry sat down, adjusting his jacket with an air of impatience. "Harry is fine, though I appreciate the respect." "Respect," Greg repeated, settling back into his own seat. That's an interesting word coming from someone who's made a career out of airing family secrets on international television. The audience gasped. Some laughed nervously. This was going to be one of those interviews. Harry's jaw tightened. "I've been honest about my experiences. Something Americans claim to value. Or so I thought." "Oh, we love honesty," Greg replied, leaning forward. "What we don't love is hypocrisy. And buddy, you've got that in spades." "Excuse me?" Harry's voice rose slightly, his cheeks flushing red. Greg wasn't backing down. "You moved to California for privacy, then signed deals with Netflix and Spotify. You complain about media intrusion while calling photographers before you go to the grocery store. Come on, man. You can't have it both ways." Harry shifted in his seat, his composure starting to crack. "You don't understand the pressure of growing up in that environment. The constant scrutiny, the lies, the manipulation." "No, you're right. I don't understand," Greg said, his tone sharpening. "I grew up in a middle-class family where we actually had to work for a living, where we didn't have palaces and staff and titles handed to us at birth." "That's not fair," Harry protested. "You think being royal is some kind of fairy tale? You have no idea what I've been through." Greg laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What you've been through? Let me tell you what real Americans go through. They work 2 jobs to keep the lights on. They skip meals so their kids can eat. They lose their homes when medical bills pile up. And they do it without complaining to Oprah about how hard their lives are." The audience erupted in applause. Harry's face went from red to white, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. "You're twisting everything," Harry said, his voice strained. "I've used my platform to raise awareness about mental health, about veterans, about important issues." "Your platform," Greg interrupted, his eyes narrowing. "You mean the platform you inherited? The one built on centuries of colonialism and privilege?" "Yeah, real self-made success story there." Harry stood up slightly, then sat back down, clearly flustered. "This is absurd. I came here for a civil conversation, not to be attacked." "Civil?" Greg's eyebrows shot up. "You want to talk about civil? How civil was it to trash your family on global television? How civil was it to make your grandmother's final years a living nightmare while she was mourning your grandfather?" "Don't you dare," Harry said, pointing his finger at Greg. "Don't you dare bring my grandmother into this. You didn't know her. You don't know what happened behind closed doors." "You're right, I don't," Greg admitted. "But neither does anyone else, because you keep changing your story every time you need another paycheck." Harry's hands were shaking now. "I have been consistent about the racism we faced, about the lack of support, about everything." "Racism," Greg said slowly, deliberately. "You married into one of the most famous families on earth. Your wife was welcomed with open arms. But the moment things didn't go exactly your way, suddenly everyone's a racist. That's convenient, isn't it?" How dare you minimize what we experienced? Harry shot back, his voice rising to a near shout. You sit here in your comfortable studio, making jokes, with no understanding of what real persecution looks like. Greg's expression hardened. Real persecution? Are you serious right now? Real persecution is not getting a bigger house on the royal estate. Real persecution is not being able to pick which tiara you wear. Come back to reality, pal. This is exactly the problem, Harry said, standing up now, unable to contain himself. People like you, with your platforms, spreading lies and misinformation. You're part of the machine that destroyed my mother. The studio went completely silent. Greg stood up too, facing Harry across the desk. Don't you dare compare me to the paparazzi who chased your mother, Greg said, his voice low and dangerous. I'm a commentator who calls out hypocrisy when I see it, and right now I'm looking at a guy who wants to be left alone so badly that he won't shut up about himself. Harry pointed at Greg again, his finger trembling. You know nothing about me, nothing about what I've sacrificed. Sacrificed? Greg let out a harsh laugh. What have you sacrificed? A job you never really had to do? A country that bent over backwards to accommodate you? Please enlighten me. I sacrificed my relationship with my family, Harry said, his voice breaking slightly. I sacrificed my home, my country, everything I knew, to protect my wife and children from the same fate that befell my mother. Greg shook his head. No, you didn't sacrifice those things. You threw them away. There's a difference, and you did it for money and attention, not protection. That's a lie, Harry's voice echoed through the studio. Everything I've done has been to protect my family. By putting them on magazine covers, Greg challenged. By writing tell-all books, by doing interview after interview, that's not protection, that's exploitation. Harry's breathing was heavy now, his face flushed with anger. You're just like all the rest of them. You don't want the truth. You want a villain, someone to mock and tear down. The truth, Greg's voice was steady, controlled. The truth is, you had everything. Everything most people could only dream of. And you destroyed it because you couldn't handle being the spare instead of the heir. That's the truth. I was never just the spare, Harry said through gritted teeth. I was a human being who deserved respect and dignity. You're right about that, Greg agreed. You are a human being, but you're also a grown man who needs to take responsibility for his choices instead of blaming everyone else for your problems. Harry stepped closer to the desk, his eyes blazing. You want me to take responsibility? Fine. I take responsibility for leaving a toxic environment. I take responsibility for choosing my wife and children over outdated institutions. I take responsibility for speaking my truth. Your truth, Greg repeated mockingly. See, that's the problem right there. There's no your truth and my truth. There's just the truth. And the truth is, you're a spoiled brat who couldn't handle being told no. Harry's hands clenched into fists at his sides. I have done more for charity and veterans than you could ever dream of. With whose money? Greg shot back immediately. Let me guess. Foundations funded by your father? Yeah, real charitable giving your dad's money away. I have my own money, Harry insisted. From what? Greg pressed. From the deals you made exploiting your family name? From the inheritance you got because of who your parents were? You've never earned an honest dollar in your life. Harry's voice went quiet, dangerously quiet. You're a small, pathetic little man who hides behind his microphone to bully people. You're everything that's wrong with media today. Greg smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. And you're a prince who gave up his kingdom for a podcast deal. Tell me, how's that working out for you? Because from where I'm sitting, you seem pretty miserable. I'm protecting my family, Harry repeated, but his voice lacked conviction now. No, Greg said firmly. You're profiting off your family. There's a difference. If you really wanted privacy, you'd actually be private. But you can't help yourself, can you? You need the attention. You need the validation. You need everyone to know how hard you have it. Harry's chest was heaving. This interview is over. Oh, now you want to leave? Greg gestured broadly. What happened to having a civil conversation? What happened to speaking your truth? You're not interested in conversation, Harry spat. You're interested in humiliation. No, Greg corrected. I'm interested in accountability, something you've been avoiding your entire life. Harry turned to walk off the set, but Greg wasn't done. Before you go, Greg called out, answer me one question. Do you really think your mother would be proud of what you've become? A man who sold out his family for money and fame? Harry spun around, his face contorted with rage. Don't you ever mention my mother again. You have no right at all. I have every right, Greg said calmly. She was a public figure. You made her a public figure all over again, with your constant references to her. You don't get to use her memory as a shield when it's convenient. Harry's voice was shaking with fury. You're disgusting. You're absolutely disgusting. And you're a hypocrite, Greg replied without missing a beat. But at least I'm honest about who I am. Honest? Harry laughed bitterly. You wouldn't know honesty if it hit you in the face. Says the guy who keeps changing his story every interview, Greg countered. First, it was about racism. Then, it was about money. Then, it was about titles. Which is it, Harry? What's the real reason you left? All of it, Harry shouted. All of those things. But you can't understand that because you've never had to deal with any of it. You're right, Greg admitted. I've never had to deal with being a millionaire prince. Must be so tough. Harry took a step toward the desk, his whole body tense. You think you're so clever, don't you? You think you've got me all figured out. I think you're transparent, Greg said. I think everyone can see through this act you're putting on. The wounded prince, the victim, the misunderstood soul. It's getting old. This isn't an act, Harry insisted. This is my life. My real life. Then live it, Greg said simply. Live your life. Stop talking about it. Stop selling it. Stop making it everyone else's problem. Just go live your supposedly private life privately. Harry's lip curled. I don't have to explain myself to you. No, you don't, Greg agreed. But you keep trying to anyway. That's what's so funny about all this. Nobody asked you to explain yourself. Nobody asked for the book, the interviews, the documentary. You volunteered all of that. And now you're mad that people have opinions about it? I'm mad that people like you twist everything I say, Harry said. I'm not twisting anything, Greg responded. I'm repeating your own words back to you. If you don't like how they sound, maybe you should think more carefully before you speak. Harry shook his head in disgust. I should never have come here. Finally, Greg said, something we agree on. Harry pulled off his microphone, yanking it hard enough that the wire snapped. This show is a joke. You're a joke. And yet, Greg Vatar said, spreading his hands, here you are, on my joke of a show, which, by the way, has better ratings than your Netflix special. That was the final straw. Harry threw the microphone down on the chair. Go to hell. Been there, done that, Greg quipped. Still more pleasant than listening to you complain about your butler. Harry looked at the audience, then back at Greg. You people deserve each other. Careful, Greg warned. Your elitism is showing. Harry's hands were shaking with rage. I'm done. I'm absolutely done with this circus. The circus? Greg laughed. Buddy, you've been running your own circus for years. This is just the first time someone's called you out on it to your face. Harry moved toward the edge of the stage. The producers were scrambling, unsure whether to cut to commercial. Walk away, Greg called after him. That's what you do best, isn't it? When things get tough, when people don't worship you, you just walk away. Harry stopped, his back to Greg. For a moment, it looked like he might turn around, but instead, he kept walking. "Ladies and gentlemen, Prince Harry, everybody," Greg announced to the audience, leaving just like he left England, in a huff, without dignity, blaming everyone but himself. Harry flipped his hand dismissively, without turning around, disappearing into the wings. Greg turned back to the camera, his expression serious now. "You know what? I actually feel sorry for the guy. He had everything. A loving family, a country that adored him, a role that mattered, and he threw it all away because someone told him he was special enough times that he actually believed it." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. "Here's the thing about being royal," Greg continued. "It's not about you. It never was. It's about service. It's about duty. It's about being bigger than yourself. And Harry? He forgot that. Or maybe he never understood it in the first place." Greg paused, letting his words sink in. "He wanted to be treated like everyone else," he said. "Well, congratulations. Because everyone else has to deal with criticism. Everyone else has to work for a living. Everyone else can't just throw a tantrum and storm off when someone disagrees with them. Welcome to reality, pal." The camera stayed on Greg as he shuffled his papers. "We have to take a quick break," he said, his voice returning to its usual lighter tone. "When we come back, we'll talk to someone who actually understands what service means. A veteran who served multiple tours and never once complained about it on Oprah. Stay with us." The lights dimmed as they cut to commercial. Backstage, Harry was already gone, his security detail rushing him out of the building. The producers were in a panic, phones ringing off the hook, social media already exploding with clips of the confrontation. But Greg sat at his desk, calm as ever, a slight smile playing at his lips. He'd said what needed to be said. He'd done what his audience tuned in for every night. He'd spoken truth to power, even when that power wore a title and a famous last name. The segment producer approached him during the break. "Greg, that was intense. You okay?" Greg looked up, his expression relaxed. "I'm fine. Better than fine. That needed to happen." "The network's going to go crazy," the producer warned. "Let them," Greg shrugged. "Sometimes you have to stand up to entitled people, regardless of who they are or what family they come from. That's the job." The producer nodded, heading back to the control room. Greg took a sip of water, glancing at his notes for the next segment. Business as usual. Just another night calling out hypocrisy and defending common sense. The stage manager counted down. 5, 4, 3, 2. Greg looked into the camera, that familiar grin back in place. "Welcome back. Now, where were we before the royal interruption?" The audience laughed, the tension breaking. They knew they'd just witnessed something special, something that would be talked about for months, maybe years. The night a talk show host refused to bow to royalty, literally and figuratively. Greg continued with his show, smooth as silk, as if nothing unusual had happened. Because in his mind, nothing unusual had happened. He'd simply treated Harry like he'd treat anyone else who came on his show, with an attitude and a list of grievances. With honesty, with directness, and with zero tolerance for victim playing. The interview clips were already going viral. Twitter was on fire. Facebook was exploding. The headlines were being written in real time. Prince storms off set. Royal meltdown on live television. Gutfeld destroys entitled prince. But none of that mattered to Greg. He'd done his job. He'd asked the questions that needed asking. He'd pushed back against the narrative that Harry was untouchable, unquestionable, above criticism simply because of his birth. And Harry? Harry had proven every point Greg made. Unable to handle criticism, quick to anger, ready to walk away the moment someone didn't treat him like royalty. It was almost too perfect. The show wrapped an hour later. Greg said goodnight to the audience, thanked them for watching, and promised more tomorrow. The routine never changed. The commitment never wavered. In his dressing room afterwards, Greg's phone was blowing up. Messages from friends, colleagues, media requesting interviews about what happened. He ignored most of them, responding only to a few close friends with simple messages. "I'm good. He couldn't handle it. See you tomorrow." Because that was the truth. Harry couldn't handle being challenged, couldn't handle being questioned, couldn't handle being treated like everyone else. And that, more than anything said during the interview, told everyone watching everything they needed to know. Greg packed up his things, said goodnight to the crew, and headed out into the night. Just another day at the office. Just another entitled celebrity who learned that victim status doesn't exempt you from accountability. The city lights sparkled as Greg walked to his car. Tomorrow, there would be more controversy, more outrage, more demands that he apologize. And tomorrow, just like tonight, he'd do exactly what he always did. Tell the truth, ask hard questions, and refuse to bow to anyone, regardless of their title. Because that's what his audience expected. That's what the job required. And that's exactly what he delivered.